She's on the
When they want to take out the field. Yeah. Community groups. The way they got their hands on
so you just kind of get ready.
That's right.
She's a gal. Somebody in the
Gardner City Council will come to order. We have a scout here this evening, Mr. David Kiker, who is working on his communications merit badge, so I've asked him to come up and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, sir. Okay, we do have two proclamations this evening. First, if the chief could join me. This is something that we do and have done every year, along with the rest of the nation, talking about Peace Officers Memorial Day. We all sometimes take for granted the folks in the police department who are out every day in their patrol cars, keeping us safe. There may be those who find it to be an annoyance. Certainly not in Overland Park, right? And but Bob's Overland Park is no okay. We won't hold it against him. Okay, but it is a very stressful job, and it's a job that that we find folks that are not always in a positive situation, and whether our officers are arresting someone or giving a ticket, or someone's been a victim, it's still a very trying situation, and as the experience will tell us, with the officer who was recently honored from Atchison, who was simply serving a codes violation, and random stranger came and shot him and killed him. It's a very challenging job, and we're very much appreciative of all the work that our officers do. So, whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that all members of the Gardner Police Department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the members of the Gardner Police Department are known for their devotion and dedication to preserving the peace and safety of every man, woman, and child living in our fine city. And whereas the peace officers of Gardner, Kansas are engaged in a difficult and sometimes dangerous profession, which at times can lead to injury or even death. And whereas the peace officers of Gardner, Kansas unceasingly provide a vital public service. Now therefore be it resolved that I, David C. Bugutta, Mayor of the City of Gardner, Kansas, do hereby proclaim May 15, 2012 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week of May 13th through 19th, 2012 as Police Week in the City of Gardner, Kansas, and urge all citizens to reflect on the ways in which our lives have been touched by the peace officers who stand guard over our neighborhoods. So, Chief, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone on our force. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of the men and women of the department, we thank you and the council for all the support, certainly the nice compliment.
And you guys do a fantastic job, and we're glad we have you.
We'll try to do better.
And I did receive a thank you for the Overland Park Police Department, by the way, over the weekend. I know that our prom was held in Overland Park, and there were some officers there, and very good, did a good job. We had no problems, so I was glad to hear that as well. It's always good. Our second proclamation is for Public Works, if Mr. Green would be so kind as to join me. You know, we also, within the city, tend to take for granted the fact that we have roads and signs and signals and everything else that keeps us going, and pipes and drains and sewers and all of the glamorous things related to city service. And all of that is kept running by our Public Works crew. I know, year over year, we always get very good feedback on how well our Public Works Department takes care of us when it snows. I know that we have others that help join in that process, and we all pull together. And thankfully, this year we didn't stress the department too much on the snow, but it is a vital service, and the way our city looks, it feels is very, very important to the community, certainly to the citizens. So whereas Public Works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewer, streets, and power, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skills of public works officials, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now therefore be it resolved that I, David C. Dravetta, Mayor of the City of Gardner, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the week of May 20th through 26th, 2012 as National Public Works Week in the City of Gardner, and I call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works, and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. In the unpleasant environment, day in and day out, whether it's raining, snowing, or blistering heat, or freezing cold, it's, if there's a hole in the road or a main that's broken, we've got to get out and get it done. So you do great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. All right. Okay. Before we move on to the published agenda, we do have time allotted for anyone who wishes to speak on an item that is not on our agenda, or an item that is on our agenda, not part of a public hearing. I know there's a number of individuals here this evening that are interested in an upcoming public works project, and may have the opportunity to speak. If you do come up and speak, I ask that you state your name and your address for the record, and to also let you know that you are absolutely welcome to speak, certainly, but there'll be no action taken tonight and no discussion on the matter. That will occur at a later date and will be on an agenda.
We came today, a group of us from the, Brian Beasley?
I'm Jackie Stahl.
We are not, we have a different last
Yeah.
name. My address, 610 South Plum Creek Drive.
And I'm at 120 East Grand Street.
A group of us came here today to talk about the future of East Grand Street in regards to where the school is going to be built. Our concern is that the current East Grand Street will be the main thoroughfare into the two schools, and we weren't necessarily under that impression. We thought that there was going to be a road built north of the subdivision. And we've asked, a couple of us have asked different people, whether it be here, staff, city council members, or the school, and we're getting some different answers from all parties. So we were hoping that we could get the issue on an agenda in the future, the near future, or whether it's a work session or a council meeting, so that we can discuss and hopefully get a road that realigns with the current West Grand Street, which would be just north of our subdivision. And the main reason for that is we feel if it isn't realigned, then it could cause a lot of traffic to go through our current subdivision, and that's obviously a big concern for us with safety, with property values, and those type of issues. So that's why a group of us are here tonight, and I believe we've talked with members of the council, and so that's why we're here, and we hope that we could get you guys to put that on an agenda, because a very soon agenda, because they're out there excavating right now, and we want to strike before it's too late.
Pretty much sums it up, but also included in that, if there is a new street, a stoplight put in there, because, I mean, the main concern with the traffic and all the, and everything is the public safety and, lots of activity. It's already a pretty hard street, East Grand now, it's pretty hard to take a left turn on, and I can only imagine if there isn't a stoplight and if that is the main entrance and exit to the school, it's just going to be a very, I don't even know where you would put, people for this school that stand out there with a stop sign. I mean, there's probably 4 different places that we have to have somebody there. So we just would like it to be considered to maybe kind of do it a more efficient way to begin with, instead of having it in the 5-year plan or something like that. Really, it's an issue already now. West Grand's busy, East Grand's going to only be busier. So if we could maybe kind of take care of it from the get-go, then it would just be safer and more effective for from the get-go with these 2 new schools that are going in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? That being the case, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? How would council like to proceed?
Actually, number 4.
Okay. How would council like to proceed with consent items 1, 2, 3, and 5?
I move we approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 5.
Second.
Motion Morrow, second Harrison, that we approve consent items 1, 2, 3, and 5. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I just had some questions about the process for this consent agenda item. I mean, are we paying for those sidewalks?
Which one are you on?
Yes.
Included in last year's budget, but not spent, was about $35,000 to install sidewalks, and let me get the microphone, excuse me,
install sidewalks between where it terminates west of Moonlight to where it picks up again. So there's a gap on both the north and the south side of Moonlight. The south side is city right-of-way. The north side is across a vacant property at Moonlight Plaza. So yes, it would be funded by the city to complete the sidewalk grid at that point.
Don't we require the developers to pay for those improvements?
On the south side, there is no developer since it's just street right-of-way. On the north side, someday, if that lot were to develop, yes, you could put a sidewalk in. The bids are out. We'll be bringing those back if we make that decision at that time if you choose. But in order to put a sidewalk on the north side of of Main Street, you need these easements. This easement from Cosentinos.
But just putting the easement in doesn't mean that we pay for the sidewalk, is that right, or?
Well, putting the easement in is in anticipation for the sidewalk project. So in order for us to construct that sidewalk, which yes is at city expense, we would need that easement.
So if we don't get the easement, then the developer pays for it?
If you don't get the easement, you will not be putting a sidewalk in on the north side of Moon.
Until it develops?
That is correct, sir. You know, we have the existing easements, and once again, we would also be putting a sidewalk to, we propose to complete the gap between Moonlight and the Taco Bell on the south side, but there is no developer there for that sidewalk. So yes, an option would be for the north side is to wait until a developer puts it in.
Do we have a lot of traffic there, or are we expecting a lot of traffic?
There
Walking traffic?
There are pedestrians along there with no place to go. I don't have a count.
But with the Quick Trip, I mean, they'll put their own sidewalk in, right?
Yes, they'll take care of what they need to do. And I think there already is a sidewalk, and anything they alter, they would replace. Yes, in front of this Quick Trip, there is an existing sidewalk.
Okay.
How would council like to proceed with consent item number 4?
I move we approve consent item number 4.
Second. Motion Morrow, second Broxman, that we approve consent item number 4. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Okay, new business item number 1, consider continuing the conditional use permit application CUP 12-01 Russell Oil and Gas Lease to the May 21st, 2012 council meeting at the applicant's request. Amy?
This continuance is requested because of issues with the lease that were stipulated by the Planning Commission, and the applicant is trying to get the lease drawn up and approved by staff before this comes before you. So the continuance, they've agreed to the May 21st meeting.
This doesn't have anything to do with decision-making on their part, as this is just working out the lease between the city and the property owners? That's where the holdup is?
Attorney Hubbard felt that we should have the lease in front of us to review before this item moves forward before the council. And they did submit a agreement to a lease, but not the actual lease itself. So we have requested that, and because we were not able to get that in time for this meeting, that's the reason for the continuance.
And if we don't approve the permit, then what happens? Tonight?
Well, nothing, tonight it's to continue it.
So if we don't continue it?
They'd have to reapply, is that correct?
Honestly, I hadn't thought that far. The applicant and staff, everybody was supportive of the continuance. If you have a problem with continuing it, then I suppose your decisions would be to approve it, deny it, or remand it to the Planning Commission.
Other questions? How would council like to proceed?
I move we continue the consideration of conditional use permit cut 12-01, Russell Oil and Gas lease to May 21st, council meeting.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we continue the conditional use permit CUP 12-01 to the May 21st, 2012 council meeting. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thanks, Dan. New business item number 2, consider passing an ordinance approving amendments to 18.95.070, 18.100.070, 18.140.150, and 18.145.020 of the Code of the City of Gardner, Kansas.
All right, most of you probably remember this from October, when this came before you, or when we first started talking about this. Outdoor storage under our current regulations is allowed in industrial districts, provided it is screened from adjacent streets and residential areas with a solid or semi-solid fence. However, it does not provide definitions for outdoor storage or what a semi-solid fence is. There's some question of whether storage of vehicles is considered parking or storage lot. And then there is some question of surfacing requirements depending on whether we call it a parking lot or a storage lot. So we had some concerns that more regulations were needed for outdoor storage, particularly near residential areas. This will help applicants know what to expect. We've had several applicants who had come before us with different expectations from staff as far as how these regulations that we currently have would be applied. So some of the issues with outdoor storage are to make sure we have appropriate zoning transitions. Aesthetics can be an issue, noise, lighting, and water quality or environmental impacts. So these are all things that could be enforced through a special use permit or additional regulations. For surfacing requirements, if we do allow gravel, it's less costly to construct and maintain, but if we do allow it, there are some other issues such as aesthetics, dust, and stormwater impacts. While it is permeable, stormwater is more difficult to direct, and there are possible environmental concerns depending on what's stored on the gravel. So this first came before you at the work session on October 10th of last year. Staff proposed several different options for outdoor storage, allowing it by right with a special use permit or prohibiting it entirely. Primarily, just to clarify, we're talking about industrial districts here. And then we also asked about gravel by right with a special use permit or prohibited. The consensus from the council at that time was require a special use permit for outdoor storage, and then it was more divided on gravel, but special use permit, slight majority. And then the council initiated the amendments on October 17th for the Planning Commission to discuss these issues. The Planning Commission discussion on January 24th centered around comparison of other cities in the county, most of which do allow outdoor storage in industrial districts by right, as long as it has a hard surface and full screening. So staff and the Planning Commission agreed that it was probably best to not deviate too far from what other cities were doing and allow storage by right with certain restrictions, and then allow deviations only with a special use permit. So the proposed amendment would, summarized on your screen, would require operations and activities within a building or buildings, outdoor storage maintained with approval of a site plan, provided it meets certain requirements regarding location. It requires it to be paved, requires it to be enclosed on all sides by a solid fence or wall, and materials cannot be stacked, piled higher than the height of the fence. And then it has that allowance for a special use permit to vary from that. And that would apply to both the M1 and the M2 district. Then under accessory uses, we had a section about utility buildings, and so this would address outside storage as an accessory use. And then under special uses, to get the special use permit to do something different, it does require the property to be zoned for industrial uses. And then the storage yards are still required to be paved unless the Planning Commission determines that it's appropriate due to the location and nature of the operation. And then it does include additional stipulations for gravel surfaces if permitted. The Planning Commission considered these amendments on March 27th. The public hearing, one member of the public did express concerns that the proposed amendments are too restrictive and would make it difficult for him to market his industrial property. Letter from that property owner's attorney reiterating those opinions was emailed to staff and the City Council on April 3rd, so hopefully you all received that. The Commissioners' discussion at that meeting primarily focused on the definitions. Those were not included with the proposed ordinance tonight. Those are to be considered separately at a later date, tentatively scheduled for the March 22nd Planning Commission, or May 22nd, excuse me, Planning Commission, so hopefully those would come before you in June. And the Planning Commission did unanimously vote to forward this to you with a recommendation for approval. Any questions for staff?
Which properties around Gardner are currently zoned for these types of uses, other than the one the Trax work went in?
There's a number of them. There's quite a few along Santa Fe Street, east of Moonlight. There's some in the area of Highway 56 and the 175th Street where that splits off. And then we have some up at 167th and Gardner Road. And there's more scattered around, but that's where the biggest pockets are.
Do we have a developer or potential sale of some land that is pushing this?
Not at this time, no.
But was the catalyst for working on this the Track Works property?
The catalyst for this was we'd had a number of inquiries about gravel and when it's okay and when it's not, and these questions were difficult to answer based on our current regulations, so we realized that we needed more direction on how to apply the regulations.
But right now, the regulations say if it's a parking lot, it has to be paved.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's not hard to understand, right?
That part is not hard, correct.
What
The
part was having
question came in
difficulty with?
if it's called a storage lot.
I mean, you're parking stuff there that's not intended to move for some time.
Well, this also applies to storage lots where vehicles are not what's being stored. Other building materials or other types of materials are stored. And so staff felt that it would be best to go ahead and address this more clearly.
But one of the slides, I think, said that most cities in Johnson County require paved lots, right?
Correct.
And when would we not require paved lots, just special use?
With the proposed regulations, that's right.
And what kinds of special uses would we be contemplating?
Well, this would be for outdoor storage and industrial districts. So one of the reasons we might consider gravel is depending on, if it's within a large industrial area, not near residential or commercial, it might have less impact by allowing gravel. Also, there's certain types of materials and vehicles and things that could tear up the pavement or that need to be stored on gravel for one reason or another. So there are situations where gravel might actually be appropriate, which is why we wanted to do it by special use so we could evaluate that on a case-by-case basis.
What kinds of things are not appropriate for pavement, other than tanks, I guess?
Certain types of heavy machinery would tear up the pavement. And then, Dave, I don't know if you're going to jump in. I know there's certain materials.
Little track-mounted equipment, a tank, except a bulldozer, a track-mounted loader, a track-mounted, anything with like the grousers or the cleats on them would not be appropriate. I mean, basically a construction yard. Strong case can be built to go with gravel for those, just because of the heavy equipment, and the type of equipment and motions that tear pavement up.
How did those special use permits get evaluated and approved?
The Planning Commission, through their discretion that's outlined in the Chapter 15, or Title 18, that used to be Chapter 15 before we changed it. I can't remember off the top of my head now. It describes what types of things they look at as far as evaluating applications in general. So they would be looking at the proposed use, they would be looking at the surrounding area, they would be looking at zoning, all sorts of public safety, health, welfare issues as far as whether or not it would be appropriate. So that they're allowed a lot of discretion as far as evaluating on a case-by-case basis because of the nature of the types of decisions that they make.
They don't want that maximum latitude, is that what they're saying? The Planning Commission doesn't want the ability to look at things on a case-by-case basis?
Well, what's important for the Planning Commission is they need to be able to evaluate things on a case-by-case basis, but they also need to be able to provide clear guidance to potential applicants so that they know what to expect when they're coming in with the application. So if they don't have any chance of getting it approved, they need to know that up front. And so it's important that we provide a lot of guidance, but we still allow them some discretion to look at the individual situation.
Well, essentially what you're saying then, Amy, is that by making the requirement that storage lots be paved, and that there be height requirements for what's stored there, that a potential buyer or developer would know if they would need a special use permit or not. And if they knew that they would need a special use permit, then that would be part of the decision-making process before they get to a point where they've drawn up plans and come in
Correct.
to community development.
Couldn't we make it so that only those vehicles that could not function on pavement be, excluded from having pavement? I mean, beyond that, why do we need any other conditions whereby they wouldn't require paved surfaces?
Well, it's hard to predict every situation that might come before the Planning Commission. There are other cases, not only the heavy machinery with the tracks, but cases where they might be storing some sort of liquid or something where if they have a spill, gravel's actually better because they can scoop up the gravel and dispose of it properly versus it running into our stormwater system. So that's one other thing. I mean, we could brainstorm 100 different ways, but you'd miss some because we don't know what's going to come down the pike. So this, I think, is the best way to address these issues, allowing the Planning Commission some discretion, but also giving applicants clear guidance and staff clear guidance as to how to handle these applications.
And that's been something that's been brought up more than once as people have come together and looked at things, is there's not the clarity that a lot of these developers like to have when they step into town. They want to have some direction so they don't spin their wheels for a long time. So
That's correct, yes. We've had a lot of frustrated applicants because they've come in thinking one thing and then it turned out not to be the case. And so this will give them that guidance that they need.
have we had a chance, I know there was a slight mention in one of the slides, but in comparison to other cities that are closer, are we any more or less restrictive with these new ordinances than what others are? Or are we equal by comparison? I'd certainly hate to leave us at any sort of disadvantage in that regard.
I would say we're probably going to be closer to the middle. There are a couple of cities, like Olathe, for example, does allow gravel in certain situations. A few others may without the special use permit, but it still has to go through the Planning Commission for a special approval. So it's a similar type of process. There are some that just won't allow gravel entirely under any circumstances. So, I mean, I think we're taking a good position as far as competing with other cities in Johnson County.
Which cities won't allow gravel at all?
I don't have the list in front of me yet, so I can't recall off the top of my head. I believe Overland Park, but don't quote me on that.
On paragraph 4, where it talks about, this is the second page of the ordinance, first ordinance, it says, materials shall not be stacked or piled higher than the height of the fence. Planning Commission may require additional screening for stored items that are large enough to exceed the height of the fence. Can we, I'm not sure why we would want to have a fence if things were allowed to be stacked or stored, I guess, maybe not stacked, but stored there that exceeded the height of the fence.
Well, the reason for that is because the fence is required to be between 6 and 8 feet high. So we do have some situations where someone might want to store something that is taller than 8 feet, some sort of piece of equipment or something. I don't think we want to say that they can't come into Gardner at all. I think we want to allow some way for them to do business here, but we do also want to protect the residents. So that's why we've got allowances where they can have that, but they are going to have to provide additional screening if we do allow that.
And the screening will be trees and ferns?
Most likely. The Planning Commission would have some discretion as far as what was appropriate in the particular situation. There are other factors, such as topography. Gardner's pretty flat, so that probably won't be as much of a problem here, but that way they'll have some discretion as far as how to effectively screen those items.
Is the purpose of the fence to keep people out or to keep it screened?
In most cases, it probably serves both.
But the large items, we're talking about trees that could take years to grow to screen a large item. The developer's not going to wait for that to happen, right?
Well, that's why it's up to the Planning Commission to determine what is appropriate to screen the larger items.
Why don't we just say stored items may not exceed the height of the fence?
Because
that way we wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, then you wouldn't be allowing someone to have a business in Gardner where they wanted to store something that was larger than 8 feet tall.
Unless it was set back enough from residential areas, right? 1,000 feet or something like that, I think I read.
I believe that this
Just
would
have to
apply
choose
even
those
if
properties.
if I remember correctly. The location criteria are separate from the screening criteria, so it doesn't really matter as long as it meets the location criteria, how far it is from residential.
And so we have a specific provision for racking height. Chassis you can stack those up to 57 feet, is that right? Racking of a chassis shall be limited to 57 feet?
No, that's actually part of our existing code, and the only reason that's in there is because we reprinted the entire section. The only part on Section 4 that is new is that number 31. Everything else is the existing code.
Is this a change substantially from what we looked at earlier? In the fall?
What you looked at earlier was not really so much a proposal as just a list of ideas for you to provide some direction on how to go with it.
Well, I thought we actually voted, because I recall this conversation on pavement and gravel, and Councilmember Fedovich and I were the only two that voted against gravel. So at that time, I thought that gravel was going to be built instead. We were the only two that said it should be paved.
I think what
It
we're
is built
voting
in
on.
by conditional use.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, but now this is saying the opposite of that, right?
Well, no, this is saying that gravel will be allowed with a special use permit. And
I thought it was gravel, period, it was going to be allowed, period, but maybe I'm
Not in this.
No, see, if you look at the screen now, this is the way that the vote went back in October. What did change from the council vote was the outdoor storage being allowed by right versus a special use permit. So we are allowing outdoor storage by right, but it does have to meet certain criteria in order to be allowed by right. If it doesn't meet those criteria, then they have to get that special use permit. So this is not a substantial deviation, but it is slightly different from what you looked at the time.
This will be ordinance number what?
Mayor, that would be ordinance number 2393.
2393.
The section that talks about uses starts with adult uses, amusement parks.
That's all existing code, except for
But
number
what is that? I'm not sure I understand that paragraph. When does that come into play?
Are you talking about the opening paragraph to that, under section 4? Any building
Right.
structure land,
Right.
that part? That's just the introduction to explain, because this is the special uses section, to explain about special uses in general. So these are the types of things that the Planning Commission and City Council can consider as part of a special use permit, operation, site development, signs, time limit, other factors deemed necessary in order that such use would not seriously injure the appropriate use of nearby properties, conform general intent, purpose, et cetera.
Except for these other uses, right? Is that how, am I reading that right?
No, the list of uses is the list of special uses. So these, any of these uses that are listed here will require a special use permit. And that then allows that discretion by the Planning Commission and the Council to determine the individual situation, because these are considered special uses that need special consideration, that are okay in some cases and not in others.
But it doesn't clearly state that, I don't think, because it says it shall be presumed that any use listed in this section shall not be permitted in the city without special use, a special use permit, unless that use is also specifically listed as a use permitted by right or an accessory use in a given zoning district. So these are the items that are excluded, or these are the items that are...
These uses are not allowed unless they have a special use permit, unless the zoning district says it's allowed by right in that particular zoning district. So, for example, if one of these uses, for example, drive-in theaters, if that happened to be listed as a permitted use in C2, which it's not, but if it was, then they would not need a special use permit to locate a drive-in theater in C2, but they would if they wanted to locate it in some other zoning district where it wasn't listed.
Okay.
And this, just to clarify, it might make more sense if we had the paragraph before this too, but we weren't amending that section, so you're not getting the full chapter. Any other questions for staff?
One more question.
Okay.
Right now, the way we have it allows the city maximum flexibility to deny a use or to require a more restrictive type of, well, maybe not more restrictive, well, more restrictive possibly to somebody who wants to come in on the cheap and do it, but certainly more protective of the citizens to have, for instance, no dust around surrounding neighborhoods and things like that from gravel. But once we put this in place, then we're really hemmed in. I mean, then an attorney like the one in the case that represented Gardner Bank, who tried to say if he did not allow us to come in and put the TrackWorks facility in there on the cheap and use gravel and low fence heights, we're going to sue you. I mean, that's the intent of that letter that I got. Did you get that letter? Remember that? So, but once we have something like this, we don't have a leg to stand on. Is that right, Jim? Once we have an ordinance that says...
No, I don't think so, Larry. Right now, the real confusion is the storage lots. And Amy and I have had discussions. Every time one of these applicants comes in, they argue about the storage lots. They think they're entitled to gravel. This changes that it indicates they have to pave it unless they have special circumstances that might allow gravel to be appropriate. So I think it's just the opposite of what you're indicating.
But we could always require that it be paved. I mean,
It is required to be paved
Well,
unless you approve an exception.
with the proposed, under the current regulations, The problem with it not being defined is it's not necessarily allowing more discretion. It requires us to have more discretion, but as far as the discretion goes, because we have no guidance for what basis we're having that discretion, I think it opens us up to potential lawsuits because we have less regulations and guidance as far as what is going to be allowed and what isn't. This, I believe, does a nice job of balancing the discretion with the guidance so that we can protect the city's interests, the citizens' interests, and the applicant's interests.
But again, right now, parking lots all have to be paid, so there's no equivocation there. I mean, they know, they can certainly come in and ask for whatever they want as a special condition, but they know from reading the ordinance that it's gonna require a paved lot.
For a parking lot, and that's the challenge, is that the ambiguity is sufficient that it allows attorneys the opportunity to say that this use is permitted by right, this use requires outdoor storage, and the code is silent on what's required for outdoor storage. And I don't think we have any arguments regarding parking per se.
Right.
The issue we have is regarding storage. So,
Well, why don't we require the same thing for storage as we do parking lots, so we wouldn't have an issue?
we do. We do. And that's what we're doing here. And, if we have, in the case, that example, the applicant would say, well, we really need to have gravel, and then the ordinance says, well, no, you have to have paved. And then they say, well, we want to file for special use. Yes, you can. Come to the planning commission, have a public hearing, citizens come in and say, we don't want gravel, it's too close to our homes, et cetera, and the special use permit's denied. And it's all done then with the backing of code rather than a
And public input.
yes, without the ambiguity that exists today that sets us up for it.
Yet, counter to Larry's point, having the added discretion on the city's hands right now, that's not been an advantage for us, has it?
That's correct, because part of the problem that we were having is, while it is clear that parking lots are required to be paved in our current regulations, what's not clear is, to applicants when they come in, is they think that they're not building a parking lot, they think they're building a storage lot, but they're storing vehicles. So without any definitions for parking lot or storage lot, it was very difficult for us to guide them as to whether or not they could do gravel or not. And then it also doesn't say whether or not gravel can be allowed for storage lots. And so, we were viewing it differently from how the applicants were viewing it. So it's been very challenging over the past few years, so hopefully this will give us the guidance we need to move forward with clear direction.
So how does a city like Overland Park handle it when they don't have any gravel use? They make storage lots and parking lots all the same, which is all we really need to do is define storage lots.
Well, it doesn't necessarily make them the same, they just may not allow gravel. And I'm not sure if it was Overland Park, so let's not.
And it's probably not a fair question to ask Amy. It'd probably be better to go talk to a council member in Overland Park or something to get the straight answer about how they handle it, really.
I don't see a lot of gravel lots in Overland Park. I think that's because most of the citizens would.
You probably don't see a lot in Leawood either, but you do see them in Olathe, you probably see them in Lenexa, you probably see them in lots of other communities.
We should aim high, perhaps.
Well,
There's nothing in here that says all of a sudden the doors are open for gravel lots.
Not at all. In
Correct.
fact, it's
It
better.
closes the door.
It closes that door, absolutely.
Yeah, this is actually going to close the door more than
It
open.
only allows exceptions under the right circumstances. So this is a much better document.
They're very defined policies.
Absolutely.
And principle and.
Much more clear.
well, and something that's going to be looked at by the planning commission before it even gets to the council. And we're talking layers of protection here.
My prediction is we're gonna end up with more parking lots with gravel and more storage of unsightly things like chassis from the intermodal and, building materials for railroads and stuff like that, which I don't see how this ordinance limits that the way it would if we, I mean, under the current situation, we already had it where we tried to limit track works from coming in, and we would have been successful, wouldn't we, Jim? If, I mean, under that situation, I mean, didn't we have a defensible case there?
Well, Amy, I think, is trying to explain that it isn't clear right now. It's not parking lots, it's storage.
Right.
That's the problem, and it's not clear, and that's what gives an attorney the ability to argue with. This clears it up.
But all we
And
have-
so we've got something really to stand behind when we say, no, you can't have a gravel storage lot.
But all we have to do is define a storage lot as something that requires pavement, and then we don't have to worry
Well,
about.
if that's what you want to do,
That's what I
but,
want to do. I don't want.
well, but
gravel.
it's up to the council.
That's what it's saying, the storage areas shall be paved.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
Yeah.
if you want
Unless you
to,
get a special permit, so it's saying exactly what you're asking for.
Which allows them to come in later and say, here's our special permit, and
Or
here's
if it's
the,
approved,
here's,
it has to be approved.
here's the variance.
Well, let's
It has to be
vote
approved.
on it and see how the rest of the council would like to proceed.
I move we pass ordinance 2393, amending sections of the code of the city of Gardner, Kansas to provide regulations pertaining to the outdoor storage in industrial districts.
Second.
Motion Morrow, second Harrison, that we pass ordinance 2393. Morrow,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Bodovich,
No.
Freeman,
Yes.
Brockstrom.
Yes.
2393 passes. Okay. New business item number 3, consider adopting resolution number
1870.
1870, authorizing the filing of an application with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment for a loan under the Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund Act. Laura.
As previously discussed at the February 6th and February 20th council meetings, council's been entertaining the idea of partnering with the city of Edgerton to construct a wastewater treatment plant in the Bull Creek Basin. And the plant will be owned and operated by Edgerton, and then Gardner will pay for those enhancements to their plant that would benefit Gardner's needs. The construction of the plant enables us to delay the necessary expansion of the current Kill Creek wastewater treatment plant, and added benefits would be to reduce the peak load on the South Lift Station, and reduce or delay the expansion of the Bull Creek Station, and also opening the southwest portion of Gardner for development. At the March 19th meeting, council authorized the mayor to enter into an agreement with the city of Edgerton to fund this additional treatment capacity and other improvements to the project. So, following council's direction, staff has begun the process of securing a KDHE loan. And I was going to bring a visual, but Dina's drawers were locked. The process of applying for a loan is a binder about this thick. This is an ongoing mini document, mini study kind of thing. So the first step in securing this loan is to authorize filing of the application. And that's the resolution that's behind here. And then just so that you know, the next steps will be a public meeting and a public hearing, both of which are scheduled for June 4th. The public meeting immediately preceding the council meeting at 6:30, and the public hearing will be part of the council.
So if we don't go this route, how do we finance these improvements?
We could sell GO bonds,
And what's the problem with that?
nothing.
What-
The
is there-
KDHE loan has already been, City of Edgerton's already embarking on a KDHE loan, so we would have to do more work to do bonds. And KDHE loan there's a deadline, there's a project deadline for the City of Edgerton, so KDHE loan has already been approved. I mean, they've already said, we will loan you the money, so.
Well, in the KDHE loan, the revolving loan, it's
They're
less than 2% interest.
at the time, they're adequately cheap.
Yeah.
So we
And less
refinanced
so
the last
than-
one, but that was because interest rates were much higher then, so,
And less so than GO bonds, correct?
usually. Yet GO bonds are sold competitively, so you don't know until the date of the sale.
What about the cost to issue versus the,
Cost of issue is more expensive for GO because you have to involve your financial advisors and your bond counsel. KDHE loan does not have that. We don't have to involve any of those people. It's
Because
just staff.
Edgerton has already applied for it, we get a free ride on that effectively? Is that
Well,
what
you
you're
never
saying?
pay, you never pay cost of issuance for KDHE loans.
Right, but I mean, we don't go through the same process as far as the same process they went through? I mean, what's the,
We're going to be able to use much of the documentation they've already turned in as far as what's the scope of the project, the studies that were involved. The only thing that we have to talk about is our what we will do for our financing, so in order to pay for our part. You're going to be able to use their drawings, their studies, their impact studies, all that stuff's already been submitted to them, KDHE.
so based on current pricing or expectations, what will be the impact to rates?
2%, in addition to the school. The school was confirmed. We've done the numbers. We've been working on the budget. Back in October, during that work session, when you approved the school project, we told you it would be approximately a 5% increase to rates if you brought that school in and we had to move our existing projects forward 2 years. That's confirmed, 5%. An additional 2% is needed for this enhancements to these treatment plants based on current estimates of the project. And that's still moving around, but we took the conservative number, the high side, 2%. So
That's 2% for how long? That's 2% for the ever?
Okay, let me do it this way. 2013, we're anticipating estimating at this time, because you haven't seen the budget and we don't know what, based on staff's projections, staff is projecting an 11% increase to the sewer fund for 2013. In 2014, we're estimating 7% with this Edgerton project in here.
And 2014 is when it kicks in?
That's why, right.
Uh,
And just so you know, because I did run the numbers on that, an 11% rate increase to the sewer bill is $59 a year for average use of 5,000 gallons of sewer a month. $4.93 a month. $59.16 a year.
For 2013?
For 13.
And then 14?
7%.
You add another 20
Yeah, another
cents.
7%.
Another 35
I
cents.
didn't run that. Because that's, again, kind of operating in a vacuum. Maybe I'll refinance something or, so that's
Based
current
on
projection.
on about a $9 million cost.
Mhm. Actually, I also ran some other numbers. Because we said it would delay Hill Creek and Bull Creek and all those other things. You just take your estimates and move them back and forth on the timeline. Let's say 2013 is 11% either way. 2014 with Bull Creek is 7, and then it goes 4 for 2015. Now, you're getting way out here, but all things being the same, 4 for 2015, 4 for 2016, 2 for 2017, and then 0. If you don't do it, it's going to be 11, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
If we don't do,
If you don't do this project.
well, we've already agreed to do it, so.
Right. I just thought I'd run the numbers and play with them and see what it looks like. So you will actually be, as we said, saving money